The war in Syria created many friendships between the soldiers and the villagers that they keep safe. Today we are going to show you the story of a soldier named Sean Laidlaw who ended up living a once-in-a-lifetime experience when he was deployed to Syria. The day he saved a puppy in need of help really changed Sean's life, and he wouldn't want it any other way. Sean Laidlaw lives in Essex, England, and he owns a gym. However, Sean's life wasn't always this way because his previous job had him jumping into the middle of the action to save lives. There's no doubt that Sean Laidlaw is a brave man. However, what he did one day after a bomb went off in Syria will make your heart melt. He had no idea his decision that day would forever change his life. The US-led coalition was now in control of Raqqa 4 months after recapturing it from ISIS. Nonetheless, the city was ridden with improvised explosive devices and buildings were threatening the lives of the Syrians and the soldiers sent to protect them. That's where Sean's expertise came in. Sean was part of the team that cleared the explosives, and after a long day, he heard a whimpering coming from a building. It sounded like the cry of a child, but Sean and his team had to first scan for tripwires and motion detectors, and then started to look for the kid. Both Sean and his team members were stunned to see that the whimpering was coming from a frightened puppy. It was shivering. It was surrounded by the bodies of its litter siblings and its mother who didn't make it after the concrete plinth fell on them. This puppy was the only one left alive. Having been a soldier for most of my adult life, I've seen the terrible consequences of war, said Sean in his book. He wrote about his experience in Syria and how this puppy he saved was actually the one saving him. Let's see their story that made everyone around the world cry. Sean says that he heard a big bomb go off in a nearby building and he rushed to see if there were any survivors. To his surprise, this little puppy came out of the rubble. This little puppy was in shock after surviving the bomb, and it looked up to Sean as if asking for help. Even though the little dog had no way to know if Sean was going to help him, it didn't have any other choice. The puppy was scared and didn't feel safe when Sean got close to him, but the English soldier did his best to earn the puppy's trust by petting it and saying, "I'm scared too." Sean was wondering what to do next, but he knew he was not going to leave the puppy there. Sean was actually not fond of dogs since he was attacked by his neighbor's Rhodesian Ridgeback when he was only 5. Putting on extra thick combat gloves, I passed him a biscuit with my medical clamps, wrote Sean. He was keeping his hands protected and trying to become friends with the scared pup. It was going to be the beginning of an amazing story, and Sean wasn't even aware of that thing as he fed the small dog. It didn't take long for the puppy to feel comfortable around Sean, and the soldier named him Barry. A beautiful new friendship was starting, and Sean couldn't be happier. But this was just the beginning of Sean and Barry's story. Here's what happens next. When his team heard Sean saying, "Who's a good boy, Barry?" they all laughed since the big tattooed soldier was using his baby talk to make the pooch less scared around him. The little dog would soon turn Sean's life around, and here's why. Sean says that war is one of the worst things in the world, and that Barry helped keep him sane. Meeting Barry had made me feel hopeful for the first time since leaving the Army in the summer of 2014, after 7 years, which had included 2 grueling tours in Afghanistan, wrote Sean. So what happened after Sean found Barry? Against my better judgment, I extended my hand, gloveless and bare, and softly stroked his head, said Sean. But he didn't take Barry with him to the base since the pup didn't trust them yet. Sean went back to the base looking forward to seeing the pup the next day. That's when he finally gains the trust of the little dog. Only after another 2 days of such visits did he seem sure enough of me that I could take him back to our base, recalls Sean. After letting the exhausted puppy sleep on his duvet, Sean gave it a bath and inspected the pooch for wounds or bites. That's when he realized Barry wasn't a good boy. He was a she, so Sean changed her name to Barry with an IE. The story gets even better when Sean takes Barry with him to the bar that night. Digger, one of the soldiers at Sean's base, was a dog lover, and when he learned about Barry, he even showed up at a bar with toys for the dog, volunteering to adopt her. Sean knew Barry would stick with him, so Digger told him about War Paws, a charity that helped rescue dogs from Afghanistan. First, he had to do one thing to make sure Barry would come with him home after his mission was over. Sean knew Barry was going to be his loyal companion for the rest of her days, so he took a photo of her in his military vest and set up a fundraising page to gather £4,500 so that they could fly Barry to England when Sean's mission was over. The photo went so viral that in just 24 hours it raised over 1,000 pounds. Check it out! The two were inseparable. Barry followed Sean wherever he went, and this might come as no surprise, but the English soldier fell in love with the small puppy. She lifted everyone's spirits, especially at difficult times, recalled Sean. Carrying her slender body in my arms, I felt the weight of the world lift off my shoulders, he admitted, saying that the other soldiers were also happy to see her around, always ready for cuddles and some playtime. Training Barry was difficult since Sean and the rest of the soldiers were turned into big softies. Even the chefs were in awe with the little fluff, wrote Sean, recalling that Barry always had a special plate of delicacy each day. Barry was the glue that stuck everyone together and even made Sean's love life get better. Back in England, Sean's girlfriend fell in love with the tiny pooch, said the soldier. When she saw a picture of her, Nettie decided she was going to be her mom. Planning our lives as parents brought us closer together, transforming our friendship into a relationship. I couldn't wait to take Barry home with me, but then came a huge setback. Sean had to briefly go to England for a wedding, and when he got to return back to Barry, he learned his contract got canceled because of the instability in Syria. It took 3 months for war paws to smuggle Barry out of Syria into Iraq in a truck. Meanwhile, Sean's PTSD was being managed by his determination to build a cabin in his parents' yard for himself, his girlfriend, and Barry to live together. 3 months passed, and Barry was still on the road. It was October when Barry was finally being sent via airplane to Paris. Sean and his girlfriend Nettie drove 300 miles to get Barry from the airport, and as they approached the location, they could hear barks in the distance. It sounded like a pack of dogs, but as the two got closer, it was only Barry in a cage. Sean was stunned. Sean knows that Barry helped him survive the war, and he was not going to give up on his new best friend anytime soon. The two were fated to be together. Here's what happened when life got back to normal for both Sean and Barry. She wasn't the sweet little pup I found in Syria. She was this aggressive big dog. Only I knew she wasn't really aggressive, just frightened, wrote Sean. He recalls wondering if Barry would still remember him. 7 months passed and he already felt sad, seeing Barry bark at him as if she didn't know him. Still, they took her to the car, hoping a good night's sleep would help Barry realize Sean was her old pal from Syria. Barry didn't see anything else other than the war, and as you can probably tell, the dog had a hard time adjusting to her new environment, although Sean did everything he could to make Barry feel safe and comfortable. She fell asleep almost as soon as we started driving, and during a break in a lay-by a few hours later, she started sniffing my leg, then fell to the ground by my feet, her belly facing up and her paws reaching out for me, wrote Sean. Barry had indeed come to her senses and was the same sweet pup he knew, although a lot bigger than she was 7 months earlier. She was 27 kilos now, and one day Sean had to carry her a flight of stairs. Barry was growing up to be a beautiful dog, and just like in Syria, she would never leave Sean's sight. Barry loved Sean, and there was nothing that could get between them. They didn't really experience a normal life, and here's why. Sean's story became so popular around the world, on TV and on the news, that he couldn't actually go back to a normal life and help Barry adjust to this life as well. You see, they were invited on the set of This Morning, where Sean talked about his story in detail. What is this awesome duo doing now? Today, I work part-time as an assistant paramedic and run a fitness training business with a friend, said Sean, and when he feels anxious, he turns towards Barry for a play session. With her around, I have clarity and a purpose, and although people say I saved Barry's life, the truth is that she saved mine, wrote Sean. Being a soldier is tough, especially after retiring. Soldiers struggle with memories from their missions, PTSD, and finding something to keep them motivated and carry on with a normal life. Meeting her was the best day of my life. Without her, I don't know if I would have ever been able to climb out of that dark pit of despair after Afghanistan, to acknowledge the atrocities that I witnessed as a soldier or learn how to be a civilian, concluded Sean. Sean has never forgotten the horrors that he saw in Syria, and he knows that Barry helped him get through them all. Therefore, Sean will always keep Barry by his side. It's not often that you get to hear awesome stories that start with a war, but this one is an exception to that rule. Let's hope more people see the story of Sean and Barry and they decided to adopt stray dogs of their own. These two share a special bond that is never going to be broken. The love between a man and his pet is something incredible, and you can clearly see it in this picture. As you can probably tell, Barry enjoys living in Sean's home from Essex, England. The dog gets to eat delicious food every day, and she also has a comfortable bed to sleep in. What did you think of this fantastic story? Aren't Sean and Barry just the greatest friends ever? Their story is surely going to inspire more people to adopt dogs and give them a loving home.